Okay, so the recording has started. All right. So while we have your attention today, there's a few things that we want to make sure you are aware of. Probably the biggest, most important piece of this presentation is to make sure that you're able to identify the specific math requirements for your specific program of study. As you probably know, Wake Tech has lots and lots of programs, and we do not require the same math, all of those programs. And so part of today, our hope is that you'll be able to identify what that is so that you can then move on to the second bullet, which is to figure out how many tiers you need to complete in order to successfully move on to the math that you need for your program of study. And in addition to those two things, we're going to give you a few tips as you are planning for spring 2021 course registration, because believe it or not, that is right around the corner. So I'm going to ask you to kind of go between a couple of different screens for me during this presentation, because we'd like for you to do some of this so that you know how to go back in and see these things after today. So if you will, without closing out this presentation, but you may just have to minimize your screen, but if you would please log into self-service. And once you get into self-service, if you'll go to the student planning option, and then under student planning, if you will select my progress. And while you're working on that, just a couple of things I wanted to mention. Deanna has put the link to directly get you to self-service in the chat box, so feel free to use that. When you're trying to log in, make sure that when you're putting in your username that you're not putting in the entire email address. So you should just be putting in the username without the @my.waketech.edu. And then your password is, of course, the same password that you use to get into all of your other Wake Tech accounts. That sometimes trips students up. And then when you're able to get into that, if you would just give us a thumbs up in the chat so that we can know that you're with us. And like I said, we are going to give you a couple more minutes to get into this. But again, you're logging into self-service. Once you get into self-service, you're going to select student planning. And then within student planning, you're going to select my progress. And I have one thumbs up, so thank you, James. And if you guys would just follow suit and give us a thumbs up when you've had a chance to get to that screen. And also, if you're really struggling to log in, maybe if you could give us a thumbs down to let us know that we need to wait a few more minutes, but it looks like many of you are ready to move on. And if you hear big pauses in this presentation, it's because I'm going between my presentation and then my phone, which is where I can see the chat. So I'm just trying to make sure that I'm hitting your questions and seeing where you guys are. All right, so it looks like, at least for those of you that have responded, that you're ready for us to move on. So perfect. So while you're in the My Progress tool that's located within self-service, this is basically all of your degree requirements on one page. So it's going to vary from student to student, because what someone needs to complete a cosmetology degree is going to look different than what someone needs to complete an early childhood education degree. Those are just two of many, many examples. When you're in your progress tab, you will notice all of your degree requirements listed. And normally they're listed into chunks. So like you might see your English requirement in one area, your humanities requirement in another area, your math requirement in one area, electives, like you have all sorts of different requirements listed there. What we're particularly interested in today is making sure that you can identify what your math requirement is for your program. So if you will scroll down, and I wish I could say that it's in the same place on every single program planning guide, but it's not. So it could be near the top, or in some cases I've seen it be almost near the very bottom. So just keep scrolling down until you see that requirement. Now, a few things I do want to mention while you're looking for that. The first thing I want you to realize is that there are some programs of study that don't even have a math requirement, as shocking as that may sound. So for example, our associate's degree in criminal justice does not require that students have a math to graduate from that degree. So if you're in that program and you're looking for that requirement in your progress tab, you'll notice that you actually can take a math or a biology class to satisfy that requirement. You may also notice that some of you are in programs that have more than one math option. This is actually becoming more popular. I've noticed since being at Wake Tech for a few years that a lot of the programs are being more flexible in the different math options. So you may see 2, 3, I've seen up to 5 different math options. So if you notice that you have different math options, you need to determine which of those math courses you want to take to pursue that program. You may also notice that not only do you have more than one math option, you may have more than one math requirement. So for example, Associate of Engineering, Associate of Science, those degree requirements include multiple math classes. So in this case, for the planning for the next semester, you're going to be looking at that next math class. Obviously, if there's more math to come, you're going to take those one at a time. And then if you're in a health sciences program, you may have a math requirement listed, and you may not have a math requirement listed. So for those programs, and I can't speak to exactly which ones there are, but some of our health science programs do require Math 003 as a prerequisite to being eligible to get into those programs, but they may not necessarily require an actual math class to graduate from those programs. So those are just a few of the different things that you may notice and that may differ between you and your other classmates. Okay, so knowing, or hopefully knowing, what math you need to take next, hopefully you've identified that. And if you haven't, then we're going to give you some time before we leave this meeting today to address that with us. But basically, at this point, we want you to be thinking about what is that math that you need to be taking next, and what or how many tiers do you need to complete to be eligible to take that math class. So for those of you that started in Math 003 with Tier 1, and you've either completed Tier 1, or I know I've spoken to a lot of you that are very close to completing Tier 1, you'll notice that you have 3 math options moving forward. The first math option is Math 110. The second and third option, the Math 143 and the Math 152, you'll notice have an and then an attached course by those two. The Math 043 and the Math 052, those are co-requisite courses that are required in addition to the Math 143 and the Math 152 for students who've completed through Tier 1. Basically, a co-requisite is a support class. So the two classes work collaboratively together, but they are 2 separate classes, meaning they have 2 separate registrations, they meet at 2 separate times, and their additional credit hours and their additional tuition. But they work hand in hand together. So if you finish through Tier 1 and you notice that Math 143 and or Math 152 is listed as your next math requirement, then just know that taking Tier 1 makes you eligible for Math 110 by itself, or the Math 143 and the 152 with a co-requisite. Now, I want to make sure that we down here at the bottom of this slide because in addition to math prerequisites, several of our math classes also have an English prerequisite. So in addition to needing Tier 1 completed to be eligible to take Math 143 with a co-req or Math 152 with a co-req, you also have to have completed English 002, which is Transition English. Now, Deanna and I and our other colleagues have noticed when you were registering for fall that some students were able to get into the Transition Math and may not have been able to get into the Transition English because we just didn't have enough seats. So if you're in a scenario where you still need to take Transition English, make sure that you are planning appropriately with that class before jumping into a math class that you may or may not be eligible for. So I just want to make sure that you're clear, and I'll mention that as we go into the other tiers as well, because that is just as important as a prereq as the math prerequisite. Moving on to Tier 2, the first thing hopefully that you'll notice is that your options just got bigger. So whereas Tier 1, you have 3 options, now with Tier 2, you actually have 5 options. So not only can you continue to take Math 110 by itself, but now you can also take Math 143 or Math 152 with without the co-req. So as before, you had to take those two with a co-req. Completing Tier 2 allows you to take either one of those without the co-requisite. In addition, you'll notice that Math 121 and 171 weren't even on the previous list. You couldn't even get into those classes just by completing Tier 1. But completing Tier 2 allows you to take Math 121 with a co-requisite and or Math 171 with a co-requisite. So just to recap the importance there, if you know that you need Math 121 or 171 for your program of study, and you're not sure, where you are in terms of your timeline for completing your transition math, you need to get through Tier 2 to be able to be eligible to even take Math 121 or 171 with a co-requisite. Otherwise, you would need to take transition math again, finish through Tier 2, and then go into either of those classes. But again, you'll notice at the bottom, just like with the previous slide, the Math 143, the 152, and the 171 also require English 02 as a prerequisite. Now, someone asked me in the last presentation, can you take the Transition English and the math at the same time? And the answer to that is no. So that would make those co-requisites. And in this case, Transition English is a prerequisite, meaning you have to have it completed before you can take those math options. Okay. Your last option is for those of you who plan to finish through Tier 3. Now, again, lots of options, but you should notice that there are no co-requisites listed under Tier 3. So what that means is Tier 3 gives you unlimited access to taking any of the math gateway classes that we offer without a co-requisite. However, the English 002 prerequisite still exists for the Math 143, the 152, and the 171. Now, what I've been sharing with students in my previous presentations is that if you're not sure where you are right now in terms of completing which tiers, how much time is left to realistically finish a tier or 2 tiers or whatever your plan is, now is the time to be having those conversations with your instructor, because when you register come likely late October, early November, you really want to have a realistic plan in place for what you're taking in the spring. And I'll talk more about registration in a few minutes, but I just want to be clear that I really, really want you to be having these conversations with your instructors at this point. Okay, I'm going to look to see if we have anything in the chat before I move on. All right, so some things we want you to remember, again, as you're planning for the spring semester. One of them is that, like we've already mentioned once before, math requirements do vary depending on your intended program of study. So if your plan is to ask a friend that also attends Wake Tech or to ask a classmate in this class what you need to be doing, we would highly encourage you not to do that because it's probably not going to be the same answer depending on the program. So just make sure that you're using that progress tool in addition to speaking with an advisor to make sure you're 100% clear about what you need to be doing. Just as I mentioned, we want you to speak with an advisor if you're not sure about A, your math requirement itself, or B, your program of study. And sometimes those co-align. So if you're not sure about either of them, for example, when you were looking at your program of study just a minute ago or in your My Progress tool, you may have seen something that looked odd. Maybe you thought you were in one program, but your My Progress tool shows something else. This is a prime opportunity for you to be addressing those concerns or questions with us while we're with you today. We also want to make sure you're aware that spring registration is very quickly approaching. So registration is going to open on October 30th. And then registration itself is based on hours completed. So I want to be really clear that not everyone will be able to register on October 30th. In fact, most students won't be registering on October 30th. That is for students who've accumulated upward of like 85 to 95 credits. Most people in this course here are probably in your first, second, maybe third semester. But just know that October 30th is the first day, but that you will be assigned a specific date and time based on your hours accumulated. Now, each semester, your registration date and time will be added into self-service. So I'm going to show you how to find that in just a second, but just know that that's not something that you have to guess about. It is actually provided for you right there in self-service. But I also wanted to take a little bit of time to talk to you about synchronous versus asynchronous course options, because you may have learned along with advisors from the fall, even the summer, but the summer and fall, where all of a sudden these words are becoming quite popular, and they're not really words we've had to use that often at Wake Tech. And so I want to make sure as you think about what the spring is going to look like or what you want it to look like, that you are planning appropriately to meet your needs. So I've given, there's a screenshot here of comparing a synchronous course option versus an asynchronous course option. So let's talk first about this the synchronous option, the very first option here. This is just an example of many that we have, but this is a statistics class. You'll notice that for the times, this specific section has days of the week. So it says Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. It also shows a specific time frame, so 9 a.m. to 9:50 a.m. And then under that, it has the dates, which in this case, of course, is the fall semester. And then under the location, you'll notice that it says online, and it also has out to the side Microsoft Teams. So this means, just like the class that you're in right now, that you're having online meetings, so you don't have to go to campus, but you do have to show up online at a specific time for instruction. So with us not knowing what the spring schedule looks like yet, what I've been telling students who ask me, what's the schedule going to look like? If you don't see a class that you need offered in a seated format, which is very possible because of COVID at this point, the synchronous online course is probably going to be your best option, because even though you can't physically be on campus, you still have that structured time each week that you're online with your classmates, that you have your instructor right there to support you. And so that's what a synchronous course is. In opposition to that, an asynchronous online course is a course that meets online, but it doesn't have any specific times or days in the week. So you'll notice here in the time section, it does have the dates, same dates as the one before it. So that's the fall semester, but there's no days and there's no times. Also, under the location, it says online, but it doesn't have anything beside it saying Microsoft Teams. So an asynchronous online class allows you to complete the assignments and turn in your assignments by the posted deadlines, but you don't have to be online at any specific time. There are pros and cons to both of these, depending on what type of student you are and what kind of schedule you have and how you best learn. So I would just encourage you to make sure that you pay close attention to that when you're planning your spring schedule. Are there any questions about these two terms before I move on to the next screen? Okay. So at this point, I want to show you how to prepare yourself to be able to identify your spring 2021 registration date and time. So hopefully you're still in self-service. And if you're not, if you would log back in. And this time, instead of going to My Progress, you're going to go back to the Student Planning option. And then instead of going to My Progress under Student Planning, you're actually going to go to the Plan and Schedule option. And I'll give you a couple minutes to get there. And then once you're there, you should see a plus sign. So if you've already planned classes with an advisor for the spring, or maybe you've already planned classes on your own, you probably already see a spring 2021 term on this page under your course plan. But if you haven't done that, then the latest semester you might see is fall 2020. So we need to get spring 2021 on your course plan, whether you have courses planned yet or not. We just need that term to be there. So if you don't see that option, you're going to want to select or click on the blue plus sign, and then it should ask you which term you want to add. And in this case, you're going to want to add spring 2021. And in my last presentation, I think it went up to like 2022, so there may be a lot of options in there. So make sure that you're choosing the spring 2021. Oops. Now, we have just learned, this is hot off the presses, right before this presentation, we learned that because the spring schedule does not get released until October 22nd, you're not going to be able to see your registration date and time until that date. So what we're doing today by adding that term is going to allow you to, you've just done one step now that you don't have to do later, so that when October 22nd comes and you log back into your plan and schedule tool, that you'll be able to see your specific registration date and time. So again, just to make sure everybody heard me, the schedule comes out October 22nd. That's when you can look to see what we're offering, how we're offering it, which campuses, is it online, is it hybrid, is it asynchronous, is it synchronous, all that fun stuff. And you'll be able to plan your courses. You'll be able to start planning like specific sections of your courses. But registration, again, is going to happen later, and that's going to be dependent upon your registration date and time. So before I move on to the next screen, can you all give me a thumbs up if you are with me? If all this makes sense. And if you have any questions at this point of anything that I've said that doesn't make sense, please feel free to either put it in the chat or just speak up. Awesome. All right. Thanks so much, guys. Okay, another really important part of the registration process is, of course, identifying who you need to see for advising, because we think advising is very, very important, obviously, or we wouldn't be in our profession. But we want you to know that you have support when choosing your semester classes. We do more than just course planning, but this is the time of year when course planning is really critical, because you want to make sure that you're planning to take the right classes for the upcoming semester. So again, if you're still in self-service, you're still in student planning, you're still in plan and schedule, you should see an advising tab. So I think it says course plan, timeline, advising, like they're 3 tabs next to each other. And under that advising tab, you should be able to see who your faculty advisor is. Now, there's a couple of things I want to mention about advising and how to determine where and how and why to go where you need to go. So if you are for the spring, if you are going to be a current or continuing student in the Associate of Arts or the Associate of Science degrees, then your advisors are us in the Advising Center. So you probably see it, I think it says CUT Advising, which stands for College University Transfer Advising. You probably won't see a name specifically. However, we did do a pilot of some case management groups a semester or so ago. So you could see a specific advisor, and if you do, that's who you should see. But if it just says generically CUT Advising, then you can schedule an appointment with any of us. And Deanna is doing a wonderful job of putting all of this in the chat for you to look back on as well. If you are a health sciences student in any of our whether you're pre-nursing, pre-dental, pre-any of those things, or actually in those, you've been admitted into the actual health science programs, you're going to meet with a health sciences advisor, either virtually or in person, but you're going to be meeting with a health sciences advisor specifically. If you are a continuing student in any of our AAS programs, meaning applied science degree programs, or if you're an Associate of Engineering or Associate of Fine Arts student, you also have a faculty advisor assigned to you, and you should see that in your record. If you don't see anything, you may want to put something in the chat or email Deanna or myself, or send us like a private chat so that we can look to identify who your advisor is. This is really important because faculty advisors do not work in the same office as us advisors do. They have different calendars and they have different schedules. So now is an excellent time for you to be emailing your faculty advisor and asking them for a good time and day and method for talking about spring course planning. It's not too early to do that. Does anyone have any questions about your faculty advisor, finding your faculty advisor, before I move on? All right. So this next slide is just really a recap of your math options once you have determined how many tiers you're going to be completing. And so this is a slide that you may actually want to take a picture of for future reference. We are recording this session as well, so I'm happy to send this out to all of the Math 003 instructors, and you can watch it back if you need to. But this is a really excellent recap slide. And something that I shared with the last group, and this is just my opinion, but when you're thinking about planning, because scheduling can be so challenging sometimes depending on what you're trying to take, be realistic with yourself when you're thinking about whether you're going to be able to finish 1 tier or 2 tiers or 3 tiers. So when you're registering in, November, obviously you're not going to be finished with transition math yet, but you're going to need to know at that point what realistically you're going to be able to finish for the semester. So if it looks like you're more likely to only finish one tier, for example, than 2, then you might want to go ahead and plan, for example, if you need Math 143, you might want to go ahead and plan for the Math 143 and the 043 as opposed to just the Math 143. Because if you're not able to finish that second tier and you have to readjust your schedule and then add in that co-rec later, it could be more challenging simply because it's extra credit hours that you're having to fit into your schedule. And so that's another reason that I want you to have these conversations with your instructor so that you can have a very accurate and clear picture of what needs to happen between now and the end of the semester for you to make whatever goal you're trying to reach. Okay, so we are going to stay in this chat area until about 4:30. So please know that if you have questions, you can either say them virtually, or not virtually, sorry, you can say them verbally, you can put them in the chat, you can chat us individually. But a few things to take away is that if you still don't know if you're in the right program, if you're still unsure of when you can register or how to tell when you can register, because that hasn't been published yet, if you're still not sure who your faculty advisor is, and if you're still not sure which math you need to be taking next, please ask us. We are here to help you. And so with that being said, that's my last slide, and I don't want to take up time from anybody who doesn't want to hang around, but I do want to thank you so much for allowing us to come and talk with you guys. We love partnering with the transition math folks, and we are here to answer questions, so feel free to ask. And again, Deanna just put our email addresses in the chat box again, so if you're more comfortable with that format, that works for us as well. Anybody have any questions they want to ask us out loud? Also, if you're taking notes and you need me to go back to any specific slide so that you can finish taking notes from that slide, I'm happy to do that as well. Thank you so much. You have a great day as well. I'm going to go ahead and unshare my screen just so I can see the chat a little bit easier, but feel free to still ask me questions. For those of you still listening, one thing that I should have mentioned when the whole group was in here, when the schedule comes out on October 22nd, if you can't find a registration date, like if there isn't one there, I would encourage you to reach out to your advisor, because every once in a while registration dates get missed and we have to put one in manually, and it's easier for you, less stressful for you if you do this before registration starts. So feel free to, make a note about that. And if you don't see that information, let someone know. So Ramad's asking, can they repeat about which advisors see certain programs of study? So for associate in arts and associate in science students, we are your advisors throughout your time at Wake Tech. So we don't assign specific advisors because there's a lot of us in academic advising, but you can either, you can always request a certain advisor or you can just see the first available. But Deanna just put that our website in the chat for you. So that's how you can schedule an appointment with us. Does that answer your question, Ramad?
Yeah, yes it does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You have a great day.
You too. So Sean asks, what is the deadline for registration? So the way Wake Tech operates is we really have what I would call like an open enrollment model. And so, technically classes start January 7th and students can continue to register all the way through that first week of classes. However, as you can probably imagine, classes that are available come November 1st are going to be way, way, way better than classes that are going to be available come January 7th. So our advice is register as early as your registration date allows. And then if you need to make adjustments to your schedule, you'll still have plenty of time to do that. But we worry that if you wait too long to register, then you're going to have a hard time getting A, the classes you need, and B, the schedule itself that you're hoping for. Does that answer your question, Sean? Awesome. Anyone else have any questions before we leave the meeting? Do you have any questions, Luna?
No, I don't. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, well, at this time, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And again, thank you